There is the part number for the headlamp switch or stalk that I purchased. And as far as the solar sensor, I just went on eBay and looked up a generic one for a 2016 Tundra because they're a lot cheaper on there. If you buy the solar sensor from a genuine Toyota vendor, excuse me, they're going to be about $100. I was able to get the solar sensor off eBay for about 13 bucks. But with the stalk, you do want to get the factory Toyota stuff because this is not a part that you want to take a chance on not working. All right, so it goes without saying that the first thing you're going to do is disconnect the battery. Make sure that you disconnect the battery because you don't want this airbag to go boom. And then you've got these plastic access panels that you can pop off. And you can see the T27, if I can get this to focus, that's a T27. There's one on this side and one on the other side. We're going to take those out, and that should release the airbag module from the steering wheel. So once you get those two bolts out, you have the connections here. You pop these little yellow tabs up and remove the two connections here. And then you've got a third one down there that should just slide off. So again, pop those tabs up and remove the three connections, and then the airbag module should be free. All right, so once we got the airbag module removed, you've got these two, this one here and this one, that you can disconnect from there. This is attached to the clock spring. And I think at this point, we're ready to get to the main 19 millimeter nut down there that holds the steering wheel onto the column. I don't think you have to take these out. I think we can leave those in there. We'll see here in just a minute. But we're definitely going to have to disconnect those so that all of this stuff is free and loose. And then I'll just go find a big socket to get on here. Now when we do that, we're going to have to take the steering wheel off very carefully because you don't want this clock spring to come apart or move around. Which brings me to another point. The steering wheel needs to be perfectly straight before you start this project. Now at this point we got the steering wheel off and we're down to the clock spring. So we're going to take this screw and this screw out so we can get rid of this plastic cover. And then we can start disconnecting the connections on this clock spring to remove it. Just once again, I'll mention this clock spring has to remain in this position. Don't let it come apart and don't let it start spinning around. Keep it in this position. That's very important because if this thing comes apart on you, you'll probably have to go get a new one. So I'll put some tape on here to kind of hold it to help me out a little bit. But we're going to go forward now and take these screws out and see what we can get into. All right, so now we've gotten the cover off and you can see the connections here. There's the one that goes into your headlight switch. You've got a whole bunch over here for your wiper stalk, and then you've got these yellow ones, and there's a black one and maybe a gray one in there also for the actually plug into the clock spring. So just carefully remove those. In order to get that yellow one out, there's a tab here. You got to put a flat blade screwdriver in there to slide it out. But that's the next step, is just to get this disconnected, and then we can remove the clock spring very gently. So once you get all the connections removed from the clock spring, you can see this tab right here, and there's one on top right there, and then there's another one over here on the side right there. You're gonna have to take your fingers and gently pry those down, and gently, I keep saying gently because you have to do this gently, take the clock spring off of the column. Very carefully, because again, you don't want this sucker to come apart on you. Lay it over there out of the way, and now we have finally made it to the headlight stalk and the wiper stalk. So we've got this tab right here that we have to pinch together with pliers to release the retaining ring. So I wanted to show you something here. So when you pinch that retaining ring together, there's also a black tab right here that you have to press up. See that? And right now the retaining ring is tight again, so I can't show you. But once you have that pinched, you're going to push that tab up that direction, and that will allow you to slide the whole thing off the column. So you can see the new one here now with the auto headlight position. The old one doesn't have it. So what we have to do is separate the wiper and the light stalks, put this one in its place, and then reassemble everything. So to do that, there is a tab in here that we have to locate and separate these two things, which is going to be over here on this side, because you can see the main body of this thing is for the headlights. So your wiper stalk just attaches right here. So we're going to get our little flat blade screwdriver, go in here on this tab and disconnect them right there. So specifically, come on camera, specifically what you're going to do is put your screwdriver right in here and press straight down, because you're trying to push this tab down. Push it down so that it will release from the hole there. Okay, so obviously reassembly is going to be the opposite of unassembly, disassembly. So we're going to slide this back on the column. And by the way, this new one has this red clip that was on there from the factory to hold that retaining ring pinched. Okay, so leave that on there obviously until after you get this slid on. And also you want to make sure that all of the tabs line back up on the column, because there's sort of a tab down there. This thing keeps getting in the way. So I'm just going to push this on. And I saw the black ring and the black tab that I showed you just a couple minutes ago. I saw that click down into position. So now I know that that thing is seated all the way on there and it's good and tight. So at this point we can go ahead and pull this black red clip out, and you heard the snap ring click into place. All right, so there you go. You've got an automatic headlight switch now. When you put the wiper stalk in, like I said, it just snaps together. All right, so the next thing we have to do is put the clock spring back in. This is the part that makes me really nervous. So I'm going to reiterate again to make sure that this thing stays together and it stays aligned. It has to stay aligned properly. So I'm going to slide this on and let all three of the locking tabs snap into position. There we go. Voila, that part is done. Okay, so at this point, we can go ahead and lay this plastic cover back on there and put the bottom section. You can see it's got a lip that slides up in here. So you just kind of wiggle it around until it's in position. Wait a minute, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. We need to reconnect all of these connections first. So let's go ahead and do that before we put this up in there. So I'm gonna hop out of the seat here. I'll tell you what, let me go ahead and pull this back out real quick. It is easier to do these connections with that bottom cover out of the way, because then you can get your head down here and kind of see what you're doing. So the good thing about all of these connections is that they only go in one place. You can't really screw them up, so that's good. So I got the gray one in on the clock spring. We're going to do it first. And then we're going to do this yellow one here maybe. Snap. And then we got the black one. Click. And then we're going to do the wipers. Let's do the inside one first. And outside. There we go. And then your headlight switch. And that should be all there is to it. By the way, you would have to do this whole process here if you ever needed to change out your ignition tumbler, which is yet another reason why they should have gone to a push button start and, you know, do some 21st century stuff. But, oh well, it's neither here nor there. So all my connections are back in. Everything looks good. Now, we'll go ahead and put this bottom cover back in. And it all just kind of fits together like so. You also have to remember which screws went where. So I try to, as I'm taking screws and bolts out, I try to kind of organize where I put them so that in my mind it will click and I'll know what order to reuse them in when I go to put this back together. And this stuff is all plastic and what have you, so no need to over tighten anything. All right, so there we go. So now we are ready for the steering wheel. So we're going to route the airbag and clock spring wiring because I didn't remove that. I left the airbag ones connected. We're going to route that through the access hole in the top of the steering wheel very carefully and slide the steering wheel onto the shaft. And again, this is why you want to make sure that your steering wheel is perfectly straight before you start this process. Let me get back up in the driver's seat now. All right, and I'm just going to kind of put it back on and wiggle it a little bit to try and seat it. This can be the hard part. And then I'm going to reinstall the 19mm nut right in the middle on the steering column. I read somewhere that the torque spec on this is 26 foot-pounds, but I can promise you one thing, it was on here a lot tighter than that from the factory, because I've got a big 1/2-inch ratchet and an adapter, and I had to really crank on this thing to get it to come loose. So I'm going to put it back on as tight as I can get it. That's what I'm going to do with this larger ratchet. So hold your steering wheel straight. It would be helpful here if you had a helper to come in here and grab this steering wheel and try to hold it straight while you manipulate the ratchet, but try to get that tight. It feels like it's pretty tight. I'm going to hit it a little bit more because obviously this is one single nut holding on a critically important part of your truck. So you want to, I'm even going to use my knees here. You want to make sure this sucker is tight. All right, that ought to do it. And then at that point, we can stick our airbag module back in. Let me grab the camera here and bring it over a little closer so you can see what we got going on here now. So at this point, we can go ahead. Actually, the next thing I'm going to do is plug these back in. Click, and then there's another little white one right here that goes in. Hard to do with one hand. Click. Okay, so you can see those two white ones right there that I just put back in. I left the black one for the airbag module connected already. Now this wire has a retaining tab that goes under, little hook right here. Be careful here. I see this. I gotta be careful here not to pinch my wires. So I'll be back in just one moment. All right, that's more like it. Sometimes you just need two hands. And put these wires back under the hook so that they stay where they're supposed to. And now the only thing dangling free is our airbag connections. So again, I'm going to reiterate that when you're doing this, you're going to have your battery disconnected. Not only should you disconnect the battery, but you should disconnect it and then wait for a little while before you start. Let everything on the truck die, you know, make sure there's no power. So actually, the next thing we're going to do is put these screws in here. There's 2 at the top, and I was thinking that there's 2 down here. Yeah, there's 2 down here on the bottom as well. So we're going to put those 4 screws in next. Those hold these buttons here, these panels with the buttons. That's what holds those in place. So we're going to do that next. All right, so now that we've got those 4 screws back in, we're ready for the airbag module. Now again, just remember that that yellow tab needs to be up. We're going to hold it up in the up position like that, and then slide the connection in, and then put the yellow tab back down to lock them into position. And then this one just slides on to the stud down here. All right, so I reconnected it and laid the airbag module back in there, and then the very final step is to go back up in here with your T27 and hit that screw, because that's what tightens the airbag module into position. And there's another one on the other side, and once those are tight, then we can replace the plastic covers, and that part, which is the most difficult part, will be done. The last remaining thing you have to do is pop off your cover for your center speaker, and then the wiring should already be in there. Hopefully it's already in there. So you can connect your solar sensor to the wiring, remove that dummy plug. See the dummy plug there? You're gonna remove that, put the solar sensor in its place, plug it up, put everything back. And at that point, from what I understand, you should have automatic headlights, which would be a super awesome upgrade for you guys to do. I'm gonna really enjoy it because I miss it. So I decided to move the danger duck out of the way, go ahead and pop this cover off just so you can see this. You've got 6 of those yellow clips, so you can just pry up on that with a plastic trim tool to gently pop it free. And you can see the wire in there. So the sensor wiring harness is already there. We just got to install the sensor, and like I said, then everything should work. So hopefully this was helpful. You know, I got the idea from some of the guys on the forum, so I really appreciate them helping me out. I just thought that visually, sometimes it's good to see something, you know, done. So maybe this will help somebody out. All right, guys, thanks for watching. We'll talk to you later.